Oh, okay. So, so welcome everyone. You can put it back. Yeah, put it. It was supposed to be like that since you guys were coming in, but unfortunately, they ruined my joke. It's fine. It's fine. I'm gonna leave now. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining me this morning. I know it's tough because it's 10 o'clock in the morning. It's the day after the first party. I am very happy to see that I have a full house here today, so I'm really happy that you guys joined me. I know how hard it is to be here so early. So thank you so much for coming, and my name is Hugo, and I am today going to show you a bunch of scripts and a bunch of things and compositing tips and tricks, basically. This is going to be a live demo. I brought my own workstation, and I have Nuke here with my own projects, so we're going to open the scripts live, and I'm going to show you some tips and tricks that I've developed over the years. First thing I wanted to ask you is, I can't really see now because of the light, but how many of you actually use Nuke? Okay, I think I got the correct room then. And how many of you, are compositors or? Okay, how many of you have never even heard of Nuke? Oh, you guys are gonna have a rough time there. Sorry about that. But hopefully after this you want to become a compositor. That's the point. So this is going to be a session. I'm hoping it's an interactive session. I hope you guys have some questions as well. I'm going to be as fast as I can because we are short of time. We only have 50 minutes. So I'm just going to get right into it. So first thing, I am going to talk about cheap and dirty tricks of compositing. And why cheap and dirty tricks? Well, I'm Portuguese. I come from Porto. I'm Portuguese. Everything is very cheap over there. So I kind of I've always learned techniques of doing things the easy and the cheap and the fast way because we never had any budgets. We always worked with zero budgets over there. So that's why that comes around. But first, let me do a bit of self-promotion. So, of course, I had to do a bit of self-promotion before I moved on the presentation. Anyway, if you guys want to check my work, you can go to my website, Hugo Guerra. Now, it's not hugoguerra.com. Unfortunately, that was already taken. It's already been bought by someone else. So, unfortunately, it's hugo-guerra.com. That is a burden that I'm going to take forever. Also, don't confuse my name with the other Hugo Guerra that exists online. So there's another Hugo Guerra which has a saloon in Chile. He's a hairstylist. That is not me. So that's not me over there, just so that everyone is cleared about it. Funny thing is that I follow him on Twitter. He doesn't follow me back. I don't know why, but it would have been nice if he would have followed me back. Anyway, so it's not this guy, it's hugo-guerra.com if you want to check my work. Very briefly, just wanted to let you know where I've worked before. So after I left Portugal, I worked in Sweden, and then I moved to London 10 years ago. I worked in London, I live in London still. I started working at the BBC as a visual effects supervisor after I left Sweden. I then worked in and out of Nexus for quite a while, almost 2 years going in and out as a freelancer. Then I kind of became steady at the mill as a compositor, as a senior compositor. Then I was offered to be the head of the Nuke department at the mill. I was there as the head of the Nuke department for 3.5 years, organizing a large team of almost 25 people, compositing all sorts of commercials. I've left the mill about 2 years ago, and since I've been a director at Fired Out Smoke, mainly working in game cinematics. Also have a double life. I am a teacher as well and a lecturer. So I used to teach a lot at Scape Studios. I teach for the Foundry, like this session is for the Foundry. I also taught for FX PhD once in a while. I did some workshops in National Film Television School, and I currently teach at Campus I-12 as well for the past 9 years. So I have a second life as a teacher and as a lecturer. But before I move on, let me just show you my show reel. Now, I've worked on a lot of things over the years, and so I really hate making show reels. It's horrible. Like, you have to edit the show reel and make it look nice. So I figured I'm going to revolutionize the show reeling business. I'm just going to put all my work in one timeline and just play it 4 times faster. It's going to be much easier for everyone to see. So here's my show reel. Okay, so thank you. So I've done pretty much anything that comes to mind. I've worked in commercials, I've worked in films and short films and cinematics, on everything that pays the bills. That's the whole point of this. But moving on, since I left the mill, I've always been a huge gamer. I've always been, people that follow me on social media, they know that I'm a huge geek of gaming. I've been playing since I'm 8 years old, since I had a Z Spectrum Plus 3, the diskette one, not the tape one, which was really nice. So I've always been a huge gamer. So even while I was at the mill as the head of compositing, I used to already do, I did Gran Turismo 5 there, Body Count, and Rainbow Six, and Call of Duty. And I've always wanted to pursue that career. Now, I couldn't really work in gaming because I can't program. I don't know how to do that. So I tried to use my best abilities to work in the games industry. So I became a cinematic director and a director for multiple franchises over the years. And this is all work that I've been doing at Fire.Smoke, for Just Cause 3, for Until Dawn, Watch Dogs, Homefront, The Division, The Crew, and Eve Valkyrie, and a bunch of games that I'm doing right now, which I can't tell you about. Otherwise, I would have to kill you before we leave the room. Anyway, I've always been a huge gamer. This is my gamer's room. I have 19 consoles hooked up to one TV. So I live and breathe games, and I work in games, and I only think about games. That's really good. So just to give you a little idea of that. Now, feel free to visit fire.smoke.com. No hyphen, just fire.smoke.com. That's the agency that I work for as a director and a VFX supervisor. It's a brand new agency in London for the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. We only work in the games industry, making trailers, making covers, making marketing for games and lore for games and all sorts of things. It's a really magical place to work. I'm very fortunate that I get to work with such awesome people there. But let's get back to the workshop. So first off, since this is a compositing tips and tricks thing, I'm going to just really briefly talk about some hardware tips for what I do ever since I left the mill. So first of all, I have become a much more portable artist, right now. And as you can see, I even brought my workstation. I have my Mac Pro here in my machine. And so I've started trying to work on a different way. I really loved working at the mill, but the fact that I had to travel every day on the train and on the tube for an hour, even though I had a Vita, it was still very painful to have to do the commute. So when I left the mill, I figured there must be another way to do this. So I started working remotely. I started working portably. So I instead of clients coming to my office, I would go to their office to work. Instead of clients coming into my office to have meetings, I would go to their office to show things. And so I started working in hotel rooms. I started working on other hotel rooms. Because I was traveling so much. And the whole thing, my entire workstation would fit inside that bag. So I started kind of trying to come up with different things. Now, these days, I still do that, but also I have my own home workstation, which is this thing. And on this thing, just to give you a little idea of what's going on here, I have, in the middle, I have a 4K monitor, basically, and then on the back down here, I have a monitor just to watch YouTube videos and streaming and Netflix, so I can be amused while I'm working. Then I have like a Technicolor full 10-bit monitor to grade. On the other side, I have like a full HD Blackmagic monitor, then a really poor quality small monitor as well. I'll talk about that in a second. And then I have some scopes and a bunch of trash everywhere on my workstation. And so one of the things that I really wanted to give you like heads up is that you should always try your best to try to get a 10-bit monitor, a 4K monitor. I'll give you an advice maybe to try to get a BenQ or an ISO monitor. One of those monitors will always really help. you want to look for something that has LUT support. You want to look for something that has at least 10-bit support for color space so that you can really work with really pure blacks and you can work with really good color space. The other thing as well that I wanted to give you advice is when you start having a setup like that and you have multiple machines working, because I found that working with just one machine is not enough. I have to have more machines around me. So that when I'm working on one machine comping, I can then jump to another machine to comp, or I can jump to another machine to comp. So I found this software called Synergy, which allows you to use the mouse and the keyboard over every screen. So basically, you're on your screen, and then you just drag the mouse to the other computer, and you can continue working on it. So it beats any KVA system or any type of splitter that you have. This is the real thing, and it works across any type of software. So you can really seamlessly move from one machine to the other machine, and that's what I do on this setup. I have a machine on the middle, a Mac Pro. I have another Mac Pro here, a Mac Mini on this side, and then I just jump from one machine to the other while I'm working and putting renderings up and down. Another thing as well is getting like some kind of video monitoring output. Try to make sure you can have something that has SDI or HDMI. You can use any kind of cards from Aja or from Blackmagic, like the Decklink, so you can actually output a pure 10-bit signal from your composite. That's very important for you to make sure that you're color correcting and compositing with a true signal. And also I got this thing, which is a DVDO AV Labs TPG. That's a mouthful. It's basically a test pattern generator that allows you to actually calibrate all these monitors professionally as well. It's a color bar generator. And then, of course, last tip that I would give you is to try to get this software called Scopebox, which is a software that allows you to have real-time scopes when you're doing compositing. And that's really helpful. For example, here's a shot that I'm comping. That's the shot up here. Then this is the smaller 7-inch version of it. And then you have all real-time scopes with all the color differences in the vector scopes. Now, one last notice is that the reason I have a small little monitor here is because most of my clients watch things on the iPhone. And so you always want to check everything on a small screen as well, because it's really cool to see things in 20 meters or in 33-inch. But I tell you, I can guarantee you that 90% of your work is going to be approved from an iPhone on a train. They're going to be on a train with the iPhone, and they're going to look at the clip and like, oh yeah, I like it, it's fine. And so you want to make sure your film looks okay on a small screen. And having a look on a small screen really allows you to understand black points and allows you to understand where masks are, allows you to also understand composition of images, and allows you to understand basically the patterns of light and darkness that exist on the image on a much better way than a big screen. So think about that as well. Now, also you need to get some fast hard drives, so try to get a RAID system or a big storage hard drive to really cache all that compositing as fast as you can. I would recommend the CallDigit T4, which is a really fast hard drive. I bought 2 of them, so I have dual RAID system. And then also, rendering-wise, I have switched. You know, at the mill I used to use Arnold for rendering. I have now switched to Redshift. You should also check out Redshift. Redshift is a GPU-accelerated rendering engine that works with your graphic card. Now, the cool thing about this is that you can use any gaming card, including Titans. That's what we use to render. Now, the advantage of having a Titan on your workstation is that not only you can render in Redshift really fast, but give you an idea, like some of the trailers you saw, we can render the entire trailer in one night. Not one shot per night, so it's quite fast. The advantage of having a Titan is that not only you can render fast, but you can also play really cool games. So you can play games on really high specs. So it's like everyone wins with this situation. But you know what's better than one Titan is having 8 Titans inside one machine. So this is really how Redshift really works on a very scalable way. Any workstation that has PCI slots, as long as they can run at 8 speeds, at 8 times, you can put a graphic card on it, and then you can run Redshift. And it's all kind of doubled. If you have 1 card, it renders at 1 speed. If you have 2 cards, it renders twice as fast. If you have 3 cards, it renders 3 times fast. So it's all kind of, and it's all GPU-based, so the CPU is not even touched. You can kind of like really have a very effective workstation in that sense. Now, talking about software, my old trusty Amiga software that I really miss a long time ago. Basically, my entire pipeline right now, ever since I left the mill, is regarding these softwares here. So we basically use Maya. Unfortunately, we have to. There's no other way because most artists use Maya, and so we are cursed to use it forever. And then we use, of course, Photoshop, which we're also cursed to use forever. Fortunately, we have Houdini to help us and to give us a bit of a light in the bottom of the tunnel. And then we have Redshift to render. We use Dropbox Business, F-Track, and Skype to talk. I'll get back to that in a second. Nuke Studio and Nuke to composite every single thing. And then I use, of course, all sorts of products from the Foundry, even products that are beta, and like Elare and other products as well. Now, the reason I'm talking about Dropbox Business and F-Track is because ever since I left the mill, I only work remotely. I only work with teams around the world. And so most of the teams are seniors that have left the mill or left Framestore or left MPC. And so I have made an entire pipeline in Nuke scripts and Nuke tools to work remotely around the globe. And that's how we work. We usually ramp up from 4 people to 15 people, depending on which game cinematic we are creating. But all the game cinematics that I showed you on my show reel, from Just Cause 3, for Homefront, for all those games, they were all done that way with large teams of remote with the hub and Fire Without Smoke, of course. So that's pretty much it. Also, every time I film something, I film it at Stiller Studios. Stiller Studios, if you guys don't know, every time I have live action, I go there because this is kind of the pinnacle of where you should film if you're doing visual effects. They have a full 101 full automated system that outputs Maya scripts, that outputs Nuke scripts. They even have plugins for Maya. So for example, here, this is a plugin that they've created for Maya. So when you're actually doing your Maya scene, you can actually have the entire set in the Maya scene, and you even have the rig of the camera. So when you animate the camera, you're not animating some random camera in Maya. You're animating the actual rig that they have on their building. So then you can animate with the limitations of their cameras, and you can animate with that actual, and then just transfer the data onto them and actually have a one-to-one representation. So this place is a really beautiful place to work. So if you guys ever have the opportunity to do some motion control, you should use Stiller Studios in Stockholm. It's a really amazing place to work. And so that ends my tips and tricks of hardware and software. Now let's get into the workshop where I'm going to open some scripts and show you some cool stuff in Nuke. You guys all good? Am I boring you? Okay, cool. So let's get on with this. I'm going to just start opening Nuke here. I'm going to show you a couple of cool things. So first of all, I wanted to start by talking about some of the most important things that for me are the cornerstone of compositing. And this is organization. Now, when you look at these composites, I'm going to show you first a comp from Homefront, which is the CG trailer that I directed last year. And so this is a composite. It's a live composite from that script. This is the shot that we did, which is basically a North Korean version of Steve Jobs and Wozniak inside their garage, trying to make an Apple machine in North Korea. And so that's the final comp that we've made. Very stylized comp. Now, one of the things that I wanted to start giving you as a tip and trick is that you want to make sure you're very organized. Now, especially because we work remotely, you want to make sure everything is very well labeled, everything is exactly that you know exactly what's going on. And I tend to be very thorough with this. I tend to be very tough with my artists. If they're not organized and if they don't make sure that they put backdrops on everything and make sure they label every single thing that they're doing, I'm not even going to accept their composites. That's how tough I am with this kind of thing, because you never know when you have to open someone else's script. So you want to make sure they are as organized as possible. So this is a typical script. I'll show you like another script so you're just going to have an idea of what I'm talking about. So for example, here, a script from The Crew, which is similar kind of thing, very organized, but still, very easy to handle and very well labeled. So this is from The Crew, for example. Same kind of deal, very well labeled and very well organized, and everything is very well placed. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you is you want to make sure you spend some time making some kind of template systems and making some kind of scripts that helps your artists to actually work remotely so that you can set up as a supervisor things before they start. Give an example. This is the CG that we got from Redshift, which is the original CG that we got for the car. This was rendered in Redshift, and it's a global illumination-based render. And it looks not photoreal yet, but you can get it to look really good with a lot of compositing. But just to give you an idea, these frames took about 10 seconds per frame to render. So Redshift was really fast to render because it's GPU accelerated. So we could literally have like these shots coming out almost every 3-4 hours. We can get a version of it, which was really great. And so I'm a very old-fashioned type of compositor, so we tend to always output every single pass that we can think of, because it's always like good to have total control. Not that you need, a lot of times if you have a good lighting artist and you have a good CG artist, you do not touch the 3D. But why not have the opportunity to do it anyway? Because if you have access to the passes, then you might as well have them here. So as you can see, I usually always output every single specular, every single reflection, and I tend to output them and make an automated script that all the stream, basically by the end of it, you get what we usually get from Photoshop, a huge layered system of passes. And this was a common pipeline we used to have at the mill, where you basically have all the passes. And if you want to make the script even faster, you usually could put even a write node here and actually output this as an EXR with multi-passes so that you can make your script even faster. And then when you start compositing this, you want to kind of composite it like a 3D artist. You basically want to think like a 3D artist when you want to do this. So every time you want to do a change to lighting, you do the change on the light pass. Every time you want to do a change on reflections, you go to the reflections to make that change. And so that's the kind of way that we work. We have everything very well divided and splitted. So we never just put grade nodes just on top of the final render. That's just a mistake, because then you're affecting reflections, you're affecting things that you shouldn't really be affecting. Just to give you an idea, this might sound very complicated, but we have a full system like that. So basically, if you go up here, we have built multiple scripts that just automated make that kind of skeleton comp. And the cool thing is that this is all automated. So if I point it to a folder, I can't do that here because I didn't brought another project, but if I point it to a folder, it will automatically pick up the specific passes to come into the read node. So you guys should really invest on trying to get some R&D to make these kind of scripts, because it will save you a lot of time than having to build all these scripts from scratch. So always have that kind of in mind, that you always want to make sure you work using your passes, but then using your passes, like I usually say, on a responsible way. You basically want to make sure everything that you change on the compositing, you change on the correct pass. So if you want to change the color, you change it on the diffuse. If you want to change something on the actual glass and refraction, you want to make sure you do it on the refraction. So for example, give you an example, a few things I did here. We did some color correction, we did some glows of the actual lights, we did some extra glows on the other side, we actually did even more glows to just make the inner lights pop as well out of the glass, so that you get this kind of overexposed look for the actual lights. Then we did even more glows, this time for the light underneath as well, and also to make it, and again, we didn't do this on top of the full render. Otherwise, if we did that, we would have affected other things. Same thing goes for the reflection. Reflection, same exact thing. We basically want to make sure we change the reflection only on the reflection pass, so that you can make sure that actually works without affecting, for example, the speculars, which by themselves, we also put some diffuse on the speculars. So you guys start to have an idea that although we are doing a compositing using all the passes, we are using them like if we were a 3D artist. We are basically affecting the materials and affecting all the light sources inside that composite set by set. You guys all with me? Yeah? Cool. So that's just another, another thing that I wanted to show you. But let's move on with the workshop, because I want to actually show you something what I'm gonna do. So I brought a bunch of topics to show. I'm gonna start with the bokeh and the importance of making sure that you have the correct bokeh and the correct f-stops. So I'm going to start by opening the script here, which is my starting point for the bokeh workshop. And now these are going to be really small tips and tricks to make your composite a bit better. Now this was a project that we did for Assassin's Creed. And I'm going to show you just really quickly what that project is. So this is this trailer here. I'm not going to play the trailer all, but this is basically like a trailer we did for a release of Assassin's Creed, a mobile game for Assassin's Creed. And we did this kind of like, kind of like statues of all the main characters made in Modo. We modeled them all, and we then, of course, used a lot of depth of field and made this kind of like special diaporama of the actual statues. So how did we do this is that we've actually, of course, didn't render the depth of field in 3D because it was going to take too long to render the depth of field in 3D. So instead, we've used depth of field inside of Nuke. And the reason we did that was because not only we could do it faster and respond to the client a bit quicker, we also could do much more photoreal and accurate color correction. So I'm just going to give you an idea of how this works, and I'm going to do it live for you guys. So this is my, my pass. So I basically have Enzo here jumping all done in marble. And basically this is a render. This is a render made in Modo, by the way, which is another Foundry product. I'm just going to do a cheeky plug there for the Foundry. So this was done in Modo. We basically picked up the models from the game. And these were models given to us by Ubisoft from Assassin's Creed 2. They had to be very cleaned up because Assassin's Creed 2 was a very old game. And so we had to do an extensive amount of remodeling to make it work. And then we did all the details of the marble, and we did all the extra stuff on ZBrush. We used also Mari, and then we used Modo to render it out. And again, the same kind of deal as the crew that you saw there. We rendered a lot of passes for it. If you look at the folder here, oops. This is the beautiful thing of using a live demo, you see. It's because Nuke does crash, and that's a reality that we all have to live with. But it's okay, it's okay. I'm sure you guys all had crashes in Nuke before, didn't you? How many people have had a crash in Nuke? Yeah. It's just because I'm going too fast and I'm opening too many scripts at the same time. That's my fault. It's always the user problem. You should always know, whenever it's something wrong on a script, it's your fault. It's not Nuke. It's your fault. It's always the user. I can guarantee you that. So, going back to this, as you can see here, we've rendered multiple outputs. It's going to crash again. I'm not going to show you that anymore then. You don't have to take my word for it. We've rendered diffusers and refractions, all the passes for that thing. It doesn't want to see it, so that's fine. If he doesn't want to work, I understand. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. It's too early for him, Maybe Nuke went out last night, got drunk. They don't want to really work anymore. Anyway, so that's the actual beauty. And then I have, of course, the depth pass. Now, one thing that I wanted to let you know is that I've always rendered the depth passes completely float. So they're always rendered in 32-bit float, and they always have the full range. And as you can see, as I hover my mouse here, we have ranges of like 41 of values, which means you can't even see the image here. And also, of course, we have entirely destroyed edges as well. So the first thing I do is I copy it in so that I have it as my pass in here. So that pass is there. And then the second thing that I do is I start building my bokeh. Now, to run the bokeh, I just have to make sure my plugin is actually running. So I'm just going to run my plugin so that it's actually running. So the bokeh plugin, you could use the Z defocus of Nuke, but I used to use it. But ever since I've started using bokeh plugin, I can't really go back anymore. So these days, I don't use the Z defocus that comes with Nuke anymore. I now use this node here, which is PG Bokeh, which is from, have you guys ever heard of this plugin? So it's a company called Peregrini Labs. Yes, sorry, I'm Portuguese. You have to keep in mind that I'm not very good at speaking these kind of things. So this plugin is, one of the cool things about this plugin is that this plugin is completely physically accurate in terms of f-stops. So any of you that have done photography before, instead of using these kind of random things that have multiplies and focal points and depth of fields which have no relevance to photography whatsoever, you can use the bokeh plugin, which actually has real lenses and real f-stops for you to create. So it will always develop a much better and much more realistic bokeh. So the first thing that I do is I grade my depth pass, and so I use a sorry, I have fat fingers, so it's not. Come on, I know I have fat fingers, but they're not that fat. So first thing is I shuffle my depth pass. The reason I'm shuffling my depth pass is because I want to make sure I actually look at it and see the edges and everything. So as you can see here, I have values of around 41, and they go all the way to the feet here, which is 54. So I'm going to just basically open up this thing and put a grade node here, and I'm going to say, okay, if the last foot here is 54 and the hand is about 40, I'm going to put my black point to 54 and my hand to 40, and this is kind of what I'm going to get. Now, the first thing that I'm going to get here, unfortunately in Modo, you get white on the background as well. But that's okay, that's not a problem. You can always put the alpha channel coming out as well. And now, the alpha channel, of course, is on your beauty, and so you still should have the alpha channel here. So you can just say that you want to put the alpha channel out, so then it's out here as well. And then what you can do after the grade is you can pre-molt your alpha channel. Now, the only reason I'm doing this is because I want to just make sure I make some edge extension. That's the only reason I'm doing that. And so once I'm here, I'm going to use a node that I usually use, which is the color extend, the color edge. If you guys don't have access to this node, just contact me in social media. I can give you this node. I think it's in Nukepedia, but I'm not completely sure. I'm sure it's there somewhere. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to fix some of the edges. So in here, of course, I have to put the mask input from the alpha channel. And then, of course, here, this is the beautiful thing that happens, because this node is meant to help you with edges, with hair, and keying. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to put invert. And basically what's going to happen is I'm going to turn off my blur grade here, and I'm going to basically just say that I want to grow my texture, and I want to start shrinking the matte just enough to get rid of that white edge there. So as soon as you get rid of the white edge, then you have a full edge of the depth of field. And you'll see why this is important. I also would put the alpha to white here to make sure everything is as it should. Now, the reason I'm doing that, one thing I should do is I should just put a bit more black point in the feet here, because it was almost clamped out to black. You want to make sure you have all the values there. This is, by the way, what I'm doing here is just for visualization. Once you go into the bokeh plugin, you don't need to have the grade node on. I'm going to show you that in a minute. And so then after this, the other thing that you're going to do to make it sure it's as realistic as possible, you want to choose a bokeh. In this case, I'm using this bokeh. You can use any bokeh. You can photograph your own bokehs. You can use anything that you want. I'm going to make sure it's reformatted, and I'm going to input it into the kernel, and then I'm going to just put it inside my CG here, and I'm going to put a copy node here. For those of you that think that I'm going too fast, I am recording this session, and it will be on my YouTube channel later on. So you can watch this again, and you can watch it with your friends as well if you want. If you want to open a bottle of wine and watch it with your friends, why not? So you can watch it later if I'm going a bit too fast. So don't worry. So I'm going to put my red channel into my depth so that I go back into it. And now I have my depth pass, which is now extended. Now, from here, the bokeh, of course, automatically will kind of not do anything because I haven't told him to do anything. I'm going to disable this grade node for a moment here. The cool thing with the bokeh node is that you can do things like this. You can tell them to use real lens simulation, which means you can now put the actual focal length that was photographed on this shot. In this case, I know for a fact that this shot was shot with a 35mm, and in here, you just make a decision of which f-stop. So let's say from you guys that know photography very well, let's say that you want to use an extreme f-stop and you want a 1.2 f-stop. then you can actually have a 1.2 f-stop on your image. Of course, now when you go into the bokeh, you have to make sure you tell them where the focal plane is. Now remember those numbers that I was grading? I knew that the foot was like on 55 and the hand was on about 40. That was the Z space of the actual depth pass. So if I put 40 here, you can actually see that now it is focused roughly on the hand. You can even put here on the focal distance, and you see that as I start moving this hand here, you can see that where it's red, that's where I'm focusing. And so the reason I was showing you the actual range was because in here I have 42.5. If I go to the shuffle and I go to his face here, you see 42.5, that's what I have on my red channel here, and that's exactly the value that I have here on my focal plane on the bokeh plugin. And so now you can clearly see that I have, if I now switch this back into the defocused image, I now have an extreme depth of field in my image. Now, as you can see, it's an f1.2, which is a very unrealistic lens to have, because actually there isn't any 35mm lens with an f1.2. This is where you can really become very accurate in reality. You can actually put a real lens here. So for example, I have a Canon 35mm lens, which has an f-stop of 1.4. So you can put an f-stop 1.4. If you wanna link it to whatever you shot on set, so if they use the lens of f2.8, you can go in here and actually put a 2.8 f-stop, and you'll get a very accurate result of the simulation of the lens. This is how cool this plugin is. Now, just to wrap up this, because I have to move on to the next topic, otherwise we're not going to finish anything. The reason I have this extend here is because if I disable it, I start having all these kind of problems with the edges. And so my extension is just helping for the actual edges of my depth of field to actually be perfect. And the reason for that is, like I showed you here, is because the cutting point is not there anymore. There is more pixels to continue. Now, to just wrap it up this, I'm going to go back into the actual comp that I've already created here. Once you have multiple layers, what you want to make sure you do is you want to start having one bokeh per layer. So for example here, I have one bokeh for Enzo, and then I have one bokeh for this guy here, which I can't remember his name. I think it's called Cesare or something like that. I think it's called Cesare. So you have one bokeh for Cesare, and then you have one bokeh for the back plate as well. All these bokehs are linked, so they're cloned. So every time I change the f-stop of one of them, I change the f-stop on all of them at the same time. And the reason I did that is because I want to make sure all my layers are comped separately, and then I just go in here and I say, okay, I don't like f2.8 anymore, I want an f-stop of 3. And then all of them change. Well, let's put an f-stop of 7, so you actually, well, there's no f-stops of 7, so let's just become realistic here. I'm going to go into my bokeh here, and if I put an f-stop of 5.6, for example, you see all the layers change at the same time instead of just changing one. So one of the other tips I would give you is always recommend you to make depth of field per layer. It will always help you much more to control the edges, to make sure you can do light wrapping between the layers, and you can make sure also you can put an edge blur between the layers as well. You guys all with me? I know it's 10 o'clock. We'll go through it. It's going to be fine. So that's the bokeh. You can check my YouTube channel for more details about this. I need to move on, otherwise we're gonna be here all day. So I'm gonna just continue here. The next thing I wanted to show you is a really simple trick. And this is the trick I've learned on Homefront. And this is something that I do, which is simulated fog. Like I said, I'm gonna jump between topics really quickly now. So simulated fog has the advantage of you making sure that you can do things like this. So fog is a very expensive thing in compositing, in 3D. And so you see here, all these are plates that we shot in live action. And of course, we wanted to have a fog because there's a bloody nuclear explosion on the background. So of course, you want to have a lot of fog. Now, for you to do atmospherics in fog in 3D, it becomes quite expensive. Of course, this fog that you see here, the actual particles, they're done in Houdini. But the actual fog effect of the layers, they're not done in Houdini, they're not done on the CG. They're done using color correction. And the reason I did that is because it's much easier to control. Now, here's a little trick that I wanted to show you, which is what I called the Y and Z color correction. And so this is a special pass we render in Redshift. You can render it on any other applications, really. But this is something that it looks like this. So it doesn't look much, as you can see. But if you look at the red channel, this is literally a depth pass, which the reason this is a depth pass and not a normal depth pass is because this is a fully anti-lazed depth pass, which means you have all the edges as perfect as possible, and you can use this as a color corrector. Then if you go to the green channel, I have the same kind of thing, but I have it as a Y pass. So basically, instead of being depth, it's Y, so I can get a very low fog effect. And then if I go to the blue channel, I have basically a side pass as well. So the way I use this is, for example, if you have this layer here, which is my CG. So this is how the CG looks like coming out of Redshift. And as you can see, there's no depth and there's no sense of scale because everything on the back there is actually not with depth, with actually color correction. So, you know, I literally just put a grade node here and I use this depth pass and I plug it into the alpha. Now remember, we had 3 types of layers. We had the blue, the red, and the green. I'm going to use first I'm going to use just the red channel. And I'm also going to, just to make it simpler, I'm actually going to shuffle just the red channel so that I actually can see it. I'm old school. I like to visualize things. So I'm going to put a grade node here, and I'm just going to make sure I can actually put the fog as much as I want. So I'm going to lower the gamma a little bit, the midtones, and I'm going to basically just lower my midtones a lot and lower my f-stop and just go really, really down there. So I have a very big fog there. And so once, you know, let's say that this is perfect. It's not, but, you know, let's say for a moment this is perfect. Once you do that, then you can go here. And now opening this grade node here, you can just then start using not the depth pass, because the depth has a lot of edge problems, but use a customized depth pass that you can then use to multiply certain parts of the image. So for example, here, I'm going to use the lift to make a bit of a hazy thing going on. And see, now as I bring in my haze, I just need to control it using this thing. So if I now go in here and I just make sure that I'm going to put the exposure on here. Sorry, I have very small screens. I'm used to using a 4K monitor, so I kind of lose space there. So I'm just going to make sure that I overexpose the area that I don't want to touch, which is the van in the front. And I'm just going to lower the gamma on the back there. And now if I go into my gamma here, you can see that now the truck is untouched and now the back is hazed from the dust. And this is a really cool way to actually do haze effects with color correction, always using the lift. Then you can do the same thing with the Y pass as well. You guys all with me? Yeah? So again, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to move on. So I'm going to move on to the next topic that I want to show you. There's no way I'm going to show you all the topics here, but I'm going to really just jump here really quickly to, because we're running out of time, I'm going to show you the actual things done already. Otherwise, we're not going to look at this. So I'm going to show you a really nice trick that I started using since I did a lot of 3D compositing lately because of cinematics, which is what I call a completely fake smoke, 2.5D smoke. And this is usually done this way. Basically, if you look at this thing here, which is let me just open up a project here really quickly, which was a CG trailer we did for a game called Rival Kingdoms. And I'm just going to open up. So on this trailer here, oh, it's an Avid thing, so I need to open it on QuickTime 7. Old trusty QuickTime 7 always works. Always works. So on this trailer here, we basically used a lot of passes to make like a lot of noise and a lot of fog. So for example here, if you look at this statue here, all this fog and all this smoke is actually generated by 2D passes. And the reason we did that was like this. We basically used this layer here. Not going to do it live, otherwise we won't have time to show you anything else. So in here you see I have my statue, and the statue, of course, on this comp, it looks, that's the room, the back, and then the statue itself looks like that. We have all the layers from, this case, this is V-Ray, actually, from rendered in Maya. And as you can see here, at some point, we get into the 3D system. And the reason I go into the 3D system is to generate this. So first of all, I go into the 3D system to generate a particle system. So if I go in here, so that I know you guys can't see very well, but if you look, if you just wait a few frames, you'll see it in a second. So you can see that there's some kind of particles flying around here, which is like the dust in the air. So this is a particle system done in Nuke, which then we use with some layers of actual smoke. I then put these layers in the 3D system. I then actually render them through a light ray or a God ray and render them out again, and then actually multiply them against the smoke. And that, once you do that, you get this kind of effect. You basically get an effect of a light pass which used to be very clean, but now it has like certain sections moving of smoke. That's the whole point. So it's what I call usually a 2.5D smoke. You use the smoke layer and elements in the 3D system and then cut it by the depth pass. And so to give you a little idea, if you watch it moving, that would be how it, oh, it's just gonna play back here. That's how it would look. And so, for example, if you look at it, I brought an extreme version of that, which is this version here. So if you look at this thing here, of course it had to fill that one there. It's missing that file. Why is it missing that file? Well, you know, this is a live thing, so that's always what happens. I'm just going to put something else there so I can show you really quickly. Yeah, there you go. So this is an extreme version of what I'm showing you. This is, of course, when he's smoking on a smoking room, but this is just to prove the point. So basically, you start with the system, and basically what you do is you use the depth pass, you grade the depth pass, you extend the depth pass, and then you basically grade it a little bit as a fog. Once you have this depth pass, you then put in your atmospheres, and you want to put them on a 3D card so that it actually moves with the camera move. I haven't done that here because it's just an example. And then I multiply it through the depth pass. And once I do that, I basically start getting an actual quite nice atmospheric that I can then comp on top. And this, of course, then can be balanced and comped on top. And then, of course, you need to, of course, color correct a little bit because you don't want to make it like he's smoking. It's all about subtlety, so you kind of want to put just a little bit there. And that's kind of how we did all these kind of smoke layers that you saw on the actual comps. All these layers of smoke, they're actually smoke passes that we put on the 3D system as cards and then multiply them by the depth pass so that we can get an atmospheric feeling. You guys all with me? Yeah? Let's move on to the next thing. So one thing that I also wanted to show you really quickly is something that I do a lot, which is called baking 3D. And the reason we did do that is because a lot of times you don't want to spend an enormous amount of time rendering the backgrounds because they're going to be defocused anyway. So if you're going to have defocused backgrounds, why are you going to waste, sorry guys, I just have to close some nukes here. Why are you going to waste time having actual fully rendered backgrounds that look perfect and takes hours to render, and then you actually are going to defocus them completely? So what's the point? So I've learned to using Modo, we started baking the CG in the backgrounds. And we did that for the Assassin's Creed trailer. So the way it works is that we actually rendered this thing here, which is a background. It's only 2 frames that we rendered. So we rendered frame 5. And so that's the background rendered from Modo. So that's the full CG background. Then we also rendered frame 120 because the camera was moving. And so now we have also 120. So we only render frame 5 and only render frame 120. And then what I do here is I use that in the 3D system to do something like this. So basically, if you just give it a second, it will populate the 3D. There you go. So basically what you do is you project into the real geometry the 2 frames. So you have the 2 cameras here, you have frame 5, and you have frame 120, you project them to the actual geometry that you have of the entire room, which was modeled in Modo, and then basically the result is this. You basically have the thing there, and then you can look at the, sorry. So that's the result. So basically you get a full 3D version of that room projected. And now because I'm going to defocus the room, it doesn't really matter that the reflections don't move much. It doesn't really matter that the light doesn't interact because it's been baked. And also when you have a very long camera move, what you can do is you can bake several layers. You can bake frame 5 and frame 10, frame 100, frame 200. You just keep baking it and baking it frame by frame. And that's how we did these backgrounds. Every single background of this project was done using this baking technique, which is literally just projecting the layers into Nuke. Even more than that, we even went one step further and we also did UV baking. So for example, for the flags, we brought in the UVs from Modo, actually, and then we baked them into the actual geometry of the flags. And so instead of rendering these flags in 3D, we just brought them into Nuke. And these are the 3D representations of those flags. And then, you know, of course, they go into the 3D system. They get with adaptive field as well, and they get rendered like that. And that's it. That's how we actually did the project. And so if you look at the very bottom of the script, the final render looks like this. So you basically have two statues fighting, well, not fighting, they're static, and the background is a full projection and the actual two flags or two basically baked projections as well. You guys all with me? Cool. Now, that's another tip. Always try to bake your backgrounds. Now, because we only have 10 minutes left, I promise that all of these topics will end up on my YouTube channel later on, but I'm going to have to skip, so I'm going to show you just one more of them, okay? So I'm going to show you the water drops one, which is a UV-based water drops. This is something I'm creating for the cinematic I'm doing right now, which I can't show you at this moment because otherwise I would have to kill you because I'm still finishing it and I would break NDA. But what I wanted to show you here is a technique that we've been starting to do, which is to pick up the actual geometry and use the geometry with UV painting and UV mapping. So basically here you see that I have the geometry. I basically brought in all the actual geometry into my composite. So here you go. This is the guy. I'm just going to go closer to him. That's the guy there. I'm just going to disable the points here, and I'm going to just switch off the UV tile and just have the geometry. So this is the actual geometry of the guy. And what we do here is we bring in the actual UV. Now, this UV is just the first frame, just for the face. And so what we can accomplish here is, for example, here, we can start bringing in textures of dirt and start actually merging those textures on top of the actual UVs. That means that you can do things like this. You then can get an actual pass of dirt that would be just on top of the geometry. And then you can, of course, output that through your 3D system. And then, of course, merge that on top on the screen. And, of course, in this case, it would be a multiplication, not a screen. And then you can kind of start getting some dirt, if you want, on top of the geometry using UV-baked geometry. Now, the cool thing with this is that it allows you to paint over on top of whatever you have to paint because you can see the actual face, which means, for example, things like this. So let's imagine that it was a raining shot and I wanted to make sure that I had some drops. So let's say here that I have this plate, and I'm going to just make sure the plate starts at 1001. And so you see, these are just basically some droplets that come down on the rain. I'm going to go into my dope sheet here and just move the slider a bit more so we have a few more drops. So you see, these are some drops of water. Now, what I've lately been doing on the last project that I've done is that because I know exactly where his face is, I can now start populating drops of water inside his face. So let's say here, for example, if I had a raining shot, I could now literally go in here, merge it. I'm going to put a transform going on here. And then I'm going to use a screen operation. So I have, just a second, I have these guys here. So as you can see here, I have my layer of droplets. I can now scale it down quite a lot. And I'm also going to put like basically a crop node here. And I'm going to put like, 200 of crop or something, so I can get a bit of feathering going on from either side. Maybe a bit more because it's a 4K plate. So I'm actually going to merge it on top of where I wanted to merge it, which is the face. Now, because I can see it here, let's say that I want the droplets to be on this side. I'm just going to scale this a bit more. So that's the droplets there. And now, because I have the geometry, I now know that it's actually wrapping up on his face. So then what I do here is I output that on my scan line. Now, the other thing as well that I do is that I only want the droplets to actually hit the face, because imagine there's a rain coming down and you want to obscure the rest of the CG. So what I did here is I put a constant of black on the other UV tile. So each UV tile for each frame represents one part of the actual UVs of this 3D. So then once you go in through this thing, then what I can do here is I can just switch off this. And now basically what I have is I have some drops of water falling down on the actual face. So if you wait a few seconds, if you now start positioning a bunch of these, one on the top of the forehead, one on the side of the face, one on the beard, one on the shoulder. You can start positioning all these layers, or you can actually even get your own plates. You can go out and shoot your own rain plates and actually project them here. What you get is something like this. You basically get some drops that actually float and move around the actual face. And then once you do that, you merge this on top of your CG. In this case, not a multiply anymore, but I'm going to put a screen operation. And of course, this is a bit of an exaggeration. I would move my thing here, so I'm going to just move it to the side a little bit. I'm moving on my 2D axis, just moving it like that. And so, of course, I'm representing just one of the droplets here. Of course, you would have to do multiple droplets. You would have to do one for that section there, one for this section, one for that section. Or you can group up all the UVs and just do them all in one go. So this is a really dirty and cheap way of doing water droplets if you have like a lot of water. I use this to do dirt. I use this to do scratches on 3D. I use this to do rain. I use this to do moisture. Any kind of dirt thing that you don't want to do in 3D, because it might take too long and it might take too much time on the rendering, and you would need to do a simulation, basically, It's something that you want to try to do this way. And so as you can see here, of course, this is like a 5-minute just test that I did here. I would have to make the drops much, much smaller. I would have to make everything much smaller. But as you can see, it works quite nicely for you to project in UVs any kind of texture, any kind of paint, or any kind of footage that you want. And this goes to more things. It doesn't even need to be water as well. You guys all with me? You all with me? Cool. So I have 5 minutes left. Not really. So we're going to stop here. So first of all, just going to go back into my thing here. Before I go, one last shameless promotion. Make sure that you follow me on Twitter. And that's Hugo C. Guerre on Twitter, or you can just find me in Twitter as well. Also, make sure you follow my YouTube channel, Hugo's Desk, to have this recording will end up on Hugo's Desk as well. And every week I output tutorials like this. And I promise you that all the topics that I didn't cover here, I will post them in this channel as well. And one last thing I wanted to just ask you guys is, you guys want to do a photo with me? I always take a photo, a 360 photo with everyone when I do a show. So I'm just going to go into the middle there, just in the middle of everyone. And I just want to ask you all guys to just look at the camera and smile and be very happy. Come on, everyone's smiling. Everyone smiling? Yay! Thank you. So the next time I do a presentation, you'll be on my presentation, because then you'll be on that one. Thank you so much for coming.